With the current perception of the ever-expanding Dragon Ball franchise, one might find my choice of title absurd, as many newer additions to the story portray its protagonist as an irresponsible man-child whose appetite for battle would drive him so far as to turn the blind eye to the potential destruction of his own universe. But with this video, I intend to highlight how these misinterpretations corrupted the original depiction of this character, while also showcasing how, through wisdom, understanding of himself and others, and from his own actions, in actuality, Goku is the smartest person in Dragon Ball. On that note, I would like to compare him to other characters within the franchise, several of whom would be considered as smarter than him, and answer why that isn't the case. To start off, the story's own resident robotics expert, Bulma, who you could call educated, but not necessarily street smart. For example, the earliest dynamic of Dragon Ball sums up as a city girl possessing futuristic gadgets, exploring the world with a simple country boy who harbors unimaginable strength. From that premise, you'd expect a plot to follow a mold of the duo balancing out each other's weaknesses for the quest to succeed. Something like the mindless brute must listen to the guidance of the feeble genius to overcome an obstacle, i.e. the brains and the brawn. But instead the opposite is true, where Bulma's lack of situational awareness almost always lands her in hot water, requiring Goku to bail her out so she won't die. Think about it like this: the very first episode of Dragon Ball ended with a pterodactyl kidnapping Bulma, and Goku having to use his resourcefulness to save her. By the way, her inability to recognize danger occurs throughout the story too, even as late as the Android Saga, where her curiosity placed her and her baby in the crossfire of Dr. Gero's assault, which if not for the intervention of future Trunks, she and her defenseless son would have perished. So again, it's not a one-time occurrence. On a similar note, temptation in another sense dulls Bulma's danger radar, where when she encounters an attractive man, their beauty leads her inhibitions astray, such as how during the Frieza saga, due to his good looks, she automatically assumes Zarbon as a sort of princely knight in shining armor trying to rescue her from the dastardly Vegeta. Near identical cases of where she fawned over a questionable antagonist occurred with General Blue, and with a transformed Oolong and Yamcha during their sketchy villain phases. So besides a lack of situational awareness, this recurring pattern also suggests that she might not be the best judge of character as well. In contrast, Goku displays great control over his urges or temptations, such as after first unlocking Super Saiyan, he contained his rage and power instead of letting it consume him. More on that point later. In addition to that, he often proves himself good at reading people. Namely, he has a high success rate of predicting villains changing their ways, such as how he told his son that the character Piccolo lacked the wickedness of King Piccolo, even before the Saiyan invasion forced them to set aside their differences in order to work together. On top of that, the series hints at his skills of analyzing people by surprisingly often coercing someone to do what he wants. He sowed seeds of betrayal within Majin Buu, provoking him to slay his boss. Or later on in that same arc, when old Supreme Kai refused to play ball, he knew what to offer him to make him more agreeable, by picking up on some similar traits shared between him and Master Roshi. So overall, Goku's propensity for understanding the true nature of people indicates how he is smarter than what his country bumpkin demeanor lets on. Returning to Bulma, with this next point, I'm not insinuating her to be stupid, but in general, this trait usually coincides with people that aren't all that bright, and it regards how she exhibits a bad habit of adventuring ill-prepared. Like when going home after the conclusion of the World Tournament, she forgot to refuel her vehicle. When helping Goku deal with the Red Ribbon Army, she accidentally took her father's set of capsules containing adult magazines instead of her own. And a few days into her journey with Goku, following a boat ride, she discovered she somehow lost all of her capsules, likely falling to the waters below. So yeah, this repeating trend kind of implies her to not be on top of things, and not the best at planning multi-layered contingency plans. On another note, after the ordeal with the boat, Bulma had no means of easy travel, so Goku suggested Oolong transform into a bike for her, which Bulma responded with a compliment calling him brilliant and smart. Now, from this scene, construing Goku as a genius would be overreaching, but it does hint that he aided in the efforts beyond just serving as the muscle. What also serves as an ode to his mind regards how he as a kid managed to survive and flourish in the wilderness completely on his own, years after the death of his grandpa Gohan. Now, yes, his strength greatly benefited him, but that aside, he still learned to live off the land. In fact, one of the series' first scenes depicts him using his tail to fish for food, which as an action shows how even though he may lack social graces or a knowledge of electronics like Bulma, he still possesses his own type of education in the sense of survival skills. On another note, he excels at qualities like resourcefulness, adapting, or thinking outside of the box. For instance, after witnessing Master Roshi perform the Kamehameha, he immediately replicated the attack, something that, as stated by its creator, couldn't be done by a normal person without decades of practice. hence a quick learner, though to be fair, maybe his Saiyan biology predisposed him for an unfair advantage. Or a separate time he proved his adaptability/creativity occurred after the Red Ribbon Army seemingly destroyed his flying Nimbus, leaving him stranded in the middle of nowhere, which led him to rummage through some capsules for a means of travel, resulting in him finding a robotic pilot and an aircraft. To start off, this shows how Goku adjusted to the modern world, as when he first saw Bulma using a capsule, due to it being outside of his realm of understanding, he accused her of witchcraft. So him using one here depicts him, at least to a certain extent, adapting to civilization. Admittedly, calling him creative or resourceful from this example may seem like an overreach, but this is basically Goku's equivalent to the Lost in the Woods city boy using flint and dry leaves to create fire. So I at least think it's somewhat of a fair argument, especially since he did it all by his lonesome. So yeah, these events prove all those attributes true. Overall, a good summation of the earliest portion of Dragon Ball would be by saying it sends a message that just because one lives in a world untouched by the customs and technologies of modern, maybe more correctly worded, future civilization. I say that since in the world of Dragon Ball, androids and hovercrafts exist. Doesn't mean one is stupid. Maybe ignorant, but not stupid. In essence, there's more types of intelligence than just book smarts. And that's the idea behind the dynamic between Goku and Bulma, where the latter, because of their background, believes they're the one pulling the strings, when in fact they're the ones often being pulled on a string, while the former is the one really in control. Moving on to the next character, Chichi, who obsesses over living someone else's standard of the perfect life, without realizing she already has something better and more suited to herself. To put it bluntly, she's the type of woman who reads a magazine and mindlessly accepts whatever it has to say. Just as with her husband Goku, she too classifies as a country bumpkin. Except she believes that only superficial traits akin to city life hold value. For example, she desires her son Gohan to be scholarly and educated, hates when his hair turns gold during the Super Saiyan transformation because of the societal belief that blonde hair symbolizes rebelliousness, and as a person overtly desires money and status to be happy. Now, because of her narrow mindset, she fails to realize alternative methods exist to succeed in life, which in general actually possess greater importance or yield superior benefits to the world than her own. Like, on numbers alone, more people of the world have the potentiality to become scholars than ever have the possibility to defeat the likes of someone like Cell. So already as a fighter, Gohan has more going on for himself than for what his mom wants him to become. But because of her viewpoint, she fails to acknowledge that latent greatness. The same applies to Gohan's unlocking of the Super Saiyan form, where she only interprets it as him turning into a delinquent, rather than him achieving a near impossible state of being. In regards to her desire for more money, though it may be a more practical wish, it in the end just complicates her and her husband's life with something they don't need. Like, Goku's powers and strengths can substitute for much of what other people would need to buy at a store. Plus, at heart, they're both country people who easily live off the land. In the non-canon GT, jokes were made about how good Chichi could cook toads and centipedes found off of a nearby mountain. Of course, money isn't inherently bad for them. There are some cases where they might need it, but with how much Chichi obsesses over it, she just acts crazy in the end. On that note, I want to mention everyone's favorite filler episode, the one where Chichi forces Goku and Piccolo to earn their driver's licenses. But first off, let me say, even though I know this is non-canon, I think it perfectly captures the essence of Chi-Chi's character. And secondly, unless you're from Japan or only recently entered the fandom, what's technically non-canon has never really mattered to the greater community of Dragon Ball fans. So don't be too uptight if you don't consider this your Dragon Ball. As in the description, Chi-Chi forced the two of them to get their driver's licenses, despite both of them being able to fly faster than any vehicle. Plus, not to mention Goku's instant transmission technique, which teleports him, and those touching him, anywhere at a moment's notice. So already the idea presents itself as absurd, and only for image/societal status sake. Now, skipping into the end of the episode, neither Goku nor Piccolo earned their licenses, but through their ability to fly, they save the lives of their instructors, which in turn provoke their rescuees, whose occupations revolve around driving, to say how their power to fly is so much superior and useful than actual driving, thus highlighting the impracticalness of Chi-Chi's views. So basically, this episode reinforces how the image/status doesn't matter compared to practicalness, or whatever just gets the job done best. Similar to my prior comparison, Goku serves as a foil here as well, where he can look past all the nonsense and see stuff for what it truly is. For example, during the Cell Saga, only he recognized the latent potential of his son's strength, something which even Piccolo doubted. So again, he possessed the clearest vision. Next, his wife criticized him for how often he ran off to fight the new villain instead of staying home. Now, Chi-Chi observes only the surface layer of this, where she misinterprets this act as abandoning the family for a little fun, whereas Goku gazes beyond into the substrate, realizing that if he doesn't fight this battle, he might not have a home to return to. For instance, he refused a free teleportation ride back to Earth from planet Yardrat via the Dragon Balls just so he could learn instant transmission. Now later on, that same technique saved the lives of everyone on the planet from a ready-to-blow semi-perfect Cell. So his wandering off kept everyone, minus King Kai, alive in the end. Besides that, he voluntarily remained dead, believing his existence attracted dangerous foes, which in and of itself promotes his intelligence through recognizing patterns. Since the creation of the androids, as well as the Saiyans and or the Frieza family empire's arrival on Earth, all sprung from ties to Goku. If you're willing to go beyond the original timeline of this story, you can even use this logic to argue Goku correctly predicted the future, since later antagonists like Beerus and Dragon Ball GT's baby came to Earth because of him. So that's another unofficial way you can rationalize Goku as smart, through foresight. Next, this may rub off as a cheap shot, but I have to call Goku's parenting smarter than Chi-Chi's. Like in the Buu saga, Gohan expressed extreme social ineptitude, likely deriving from his mother's actions, since to advance his studies, she basically locked him away in a room separating him from others, whereas his father's influence encouraged him to see the world and meet new people, so you could say Chi-Chi created Gohan's issues later in life. Admittedly, this is a weird subject because you could argue Goku shouldn't have remained dead then, and from another standpoint one could say his father's power contributed to the distortion of his worldview, but I still see this perspective as more right than wrong. Speaking of which, up next, the son himself in Gohan. Similar to Bulma, his book smarts also outpaces his father's, but in terms of wisdom, the infinitely far more important of the two, he falls short. For instance, when he attains a higher power, Super Saiyan 2, or Old Supreme Kai unlocking his potential, it almost always goes to his head, either inflating his ego or emotionally blinding him. Like in the Cell saga, his power consumed him, where his prolonging of the battle just because he loved to torment his opponent led to his father's untimely demise. With Goku, on the other hand, when faced with the potentiality of losing control after turning Super Saiyan, led him to coerce his son to flee, just as a precaution, even though he maintained a sound mind. So Goku's wiser mentality not only allows him to better control his emotions, but also to make smarter decisions on the battlefield. Similarly, in Gohan's battle against Super Buu post-absorption of Gotenks and Piccolo, he let his overconfidence and power-boosted ego get to his head, particularly in the anime adaptation, where he openly mocked his opponent, spoke about how he's smarter than Piccolo and stronger than Gotenks, only to shortly afterwards get absolutely schooled to the point that his only chance of survival meant hiding out till Gotenks' fusion wore off. So his boastful attitude misjudged the situation and made him look like a fool in the end. In contrast, Goku understood and frequently admits if something goes beyond his limitations, such as with Cell, and he even expressed doubt that as a Super Saiyan 3 he could have beaten Majin Buu, meaning his lack of an ego prevents him from overestimating himself and underestimating his enemies. To be 100% accurate, since I mentioned emotions, I should address that a young Goku after Krillin's murder flew into a rage, rushing off into danger to hunt down his killer. So in a certain sense, he did let anger get to his head in that case, but he never succumbed to impractical sadistic pleasures like his son did, which basically sabotaged the mission. Besides that too, there's still a myriad of other qualities hinting at Goku being smarter than Gohan. What also presents Gohan as not as mentally grounded as Goku regards how he completely abided by his mother's model for the ideal person, which ultimately sent him down a path of physical deterioration to the point that his adult body ranked beneath his teenage self in terms of strength. Again, in the world of Dragon Ball, society can far more easily produce a scholar than someone who can emerge victorious against someone like Cell. Plus, not to mention, since the deaths of his father, the world needed a hero more than it did a scholar, especially considering how often a villain comes attempting to destroy the planet. So Gohan's obedience towards his mother implies he doesn't understand what's truly important or necessary, unlike his dad. To say this too, the young half-Saiyan lacked his father's social skills. Like during his high school years, the character of Videl surprisingly often got the better of him. She tricked him into outing himself as Great Saiyaman, leading her to blackmail him into teaching her how to fly. Now, later on, in this same saga, I remind everyone how Goku pulled a fast one on Old Supreme Kai and the anime version of Majin Buu, meaning he knew and understood people better than his son. Another aspect with how Goku intellectually outshines Gohan involves his battle savviness, or better put, the ability to think outside of the box. With that, I go to his battle against a light-eating Yakon, who restricted his use of Super Saiyan, meaning that the protagonist faced a technically stronger opponent on their home turf because of the dark environment. Now, Gohan's solution involved ganging up on the enemy, so no strategy, just power and numbers, whereas Goku's plan had him overfeed his opponent to light from his Super Saiyan form till he popped. So to continue to fight on his own, Goku used creativity to win, meaning that in this scenario, Goku's plan relied more on mind, while Gohan's on raw power. Which, at least for this situation, stands as a good argument for Goku being the smarter of the two. Overall, a good way to explain why Goku is smarter than Gohan would be by saying he has wisdom, and because of that, he understands and knows how to use what he has. Whereas since his son only has knowledge, he lacks the intuition to know how to properly apply them. Like, his more emotional mentality offers him an extra power boost, but since he lacks the part of his brain to keep it under check, it often ends up a liability instead. Moving on to the next character of Future Trunks. Now, both he and Goku achieve Super Saiyan Grade 3. For those who don't know, is a muscle-bound state that strongly resembles the legendary Super Saiyan form, except only the former utilized it in serious combat, which resulted in him getting outpaced on the battlefield due to poor mobility from the excess bulk. Now, Goku's neglect of this form, or at least outside of a demonstration, emphasizes how he isn't just some mindless brute with a high power level, but that he actually understands the inner workings of the body, and the importance of movement in combat, as he recognized its drawbacks even before putting it to use. Hence why in this scenario, Goku is smarter than Future Trunks, who blissfully used the form unaware of its innate faults. Continuing on to Vegeta, and why he always falls short of Goku. To start off, as a person, he obsesses over the superficial image without comprehending its true meaning. Like, throughout the story, he commonly defines himself via status or title. In the Saiyan saga, he constantly mentions his rank as a super elite. On Namek, just because he feels stronger, he begins to refer to himself as a Super Saiyan, without having unlocked the transformation yet. In addition to that, he frequently reminds everyone how he happens to hold the title of the Prince of all Saiyans. So yeah, he endlessly uses his standing in life to prove his worth. Goku, on the other hand, almost completely disassociates himself from intangible titles, such as how nearing the end of Dragon Ball, after defeating Piccolo, when offered by Kami, he openly declined the chance to assume the position of the Guardian of Earth, despite the fact that in name, he literally just fulfilled that role. Thus meaning Goku does the deed because he wants to, or feels that it should be done, rather than specifically seeking status, a reward, or credit. On a similar note, Vegeta initially accepted the family life not out of love or enjoying the presence of Bulma, but because he believed it served as a source of power for Goku, and that following suit might empower him as well. So again, for him, the reward, not the deed, along with the prestige, not the essence. Next, Vegeta's pursuit of status blinded him from seeing what was truly important, and coerced him into making some unwise decisions. For example, because Vegeta desired to prove himself the strongest, he foolishly allowed Cell the time to evolve into his perfect form, which culminated in the Saiyan Prince learning the hard way that he doesn't sit atop the power level food chain. And not to mention, you can't forget how this selfish action further endangered everyone else on the planet too. Again, in contrast, even though Goku enjoyed a good battle, he still recognized the mission came first. Like throughout the battle against Super Buu, he expressed no issues in fusing to win, while Vegeta on the other hand drug his foot the entire time. Besides that too, Goku saw no shame in second place. Like in the times Gohan possessed greater capabilities than himself, the Cell games for instance, he happily took backseat if he perceived the challenge as beyond his own limitations. To sum it all up, both Goku and Vegeta lived for fighting, but the former kept it under control and never let it cloud his judgment, while the latter let it consume him, which often made bad situations even more dire. Going off on a bit of a tangent, I want to extrapolate this idea into a defense debunking a common criticism against the series and its protagonist, being that Goku lacking a goal makes him a shallow character. To start off, Goku's relationship with Vegeta actually pokes holes in characters that too heavily center around goals. Think about it like this. Vegeta's obsession over becoming the strongest always led him to feel unsatisfied with himself, like he yearned for the Super Saiyan transformation, but once achieved, it almost immediately lost all value to him afterwards, since while using it he lost a fight to a female cyborg, spiraling him down into a deeper depression than before. This trend still continues. At the conclusion of the Cell saga, he nearly quits combat altogether once he realizes his dreams lack plausibility anymore, such as Gohan's emotions allowing him to reach a level beyond Super Saiyan, one likely above Vegeta's grade. And secondly, with Goku deceased, he couldn't avenge his prior loss with a rematch. So, through Vegeta, Dragon Ball highlights how not everyone can achieve their goals, and even if they can, that doesn't mean they'll automatically receive their happily ever after fairy tale ending, since things can still go wrong. Now, nearing the end of the story, Vegeta finally concluded why he always fell short of his rival, which stemmed from Goku not fighting for glory, to prove himself, nor even for his family, but because it provided him with a sense of fulfillment in life. Basically, he found it fun, and cheap as though this may sound, if you're enjoying yourself, you can't really fail. Basically, because Vegeta strove to be the best, anytime he encountered something that surpassed himself, he became discouraged. While if the same thing happened to Goku, he became encouraged, as it meant a new challenge to test himself with. For all intents and purposes, because Vegeta focused on goals and superficial statuses, he lost sight in what was fun about fighting, which made him miserable and held back his development as a fighter, hence why Goku seemingly always came out on top. So, since in Dragon Ball Z goals hindered Vegeta, stands as why I don't view it as a valid criticism for Goku, and why I also say there's a lot more to the franchise than most realize. With that said, now would be a good time to switch over to the next topic. To begin, it's funny how in a series named after wish-granting orbs, its protagonist expresses little to no interest in them, or at least other than the occasional desire to resurrect a fallen friend, which as an aspect portrays an intelligence he possesses that most other characters of the series lack, through how he knows what makes him happy and can appreciate the value of what he already has. For example, Bulma initially wanted to use the Dragon Balls to wish for a boyfriend, and Yamcha sought them to help him get a date / overcome his shyness around girls. Basically, the two of them already had their wish in front of them, and they failed to recognize it. Or at least until after, keyword after, the post-wish Dragon Balls became inactive. Again, that blindness stands as another reason for why Bulma isn't as smart as she seems. In contrast, after the Dragon Balls reactivated and Goku went searching for the 4-star ball, he had the time of his life, just from the simple pleasure of experiencing the world on the way there. So Goku could see the value in things without having to hear, "your wish is granted." Similarly, many characters of the franchise think they know what will make them happy when they really don't, which indicates a failure of self-understanding. Returning to Vegeta, he thought achieving Super Saiyan would satisfy him, but once it lost to Android 18, he became unhappy again and had to move the goalpost of what he yearned for. The trend even began before that, as he initially desired the Dragon Balls to wish for immortality, believing that to be the only course of option for overcoming Frieza. But once Goku tapped into a hidden power to win, Vegeta lost all interest in the Dragon Balls and instead chose to follow in Goku's footsteps. With Tien, when he first appeared in the story, he desired to become more like his idol mercenary Tao, but after realizing he had a conscience and lacked the evil streak, he learned that the assassin life wasn't for him. Basically, neither character understood their identity or what would help them find happiness. Whereas again, Goku knew what he wanted and understood its true value. He pursued the 4-star Dragon Ball because he associated with the memory of his adoptive grandpa, so for sentimental reasons, instead of viewing it through a fantastical what-if lens. Just for a laugh, I thought I'd throw this in as well. In his debut episode, Oolong, wanting a harem, transformed into a monster to scare a bunch of villagers into giving him their women. But after he got them, he practically begged their families to take them back, because they didn't obey his wishes and just lounged around. So he believed he desired something without thinking of the reality of it or its potential drawbacks. In addition to that, when he came before the gathered Dragon Balls, he wished for a simple pair of panties. Likewise, the diminutive leader of the Red Ribbon Army sought them to tack on a few extra centimeters to his height. So those characters had the world at their fingertips, but instead settled for insignificant pleasures that probably won't mean anything a month later. Overall, in a series about searching for mystical wish-granting orbs, most characters don't understand what will make them truly happy or gives them fulfillment in life, except its discreetly intelligent protagonist who could satisfy himself from a simple brawl or, during his youth, a sightseeing expedition. Which is one of the reasons of why Goku is the smartest character in Dragon Ball. Moving on to the next subject, I want to discuss some of the other wise and intelligent characters of the franchise and compare them to Goku, while also showcasing how quite often great minds come in unassuming packages. To begin, Master Roshi, who most fans only remember as a pervert used for scenes of comedic relief. To debunk that perception, I go to the most underrated master-apprentice relationship of the franchise, between him and Tien. To start off, I go to their scuffle together during Dragon Ball's Second World Tournament arc, where mid-battle, much to the bewilderment of Tien, a still strong and unhurt Roshi, as Jackie Chun, walked out of the ring, thus forfeiting their match, which utterly baffled the Triclops, provoking him to force an answer out of his elderly opponent, to which the old master replied that he views him as a worthy successor and wants the new generation to take over. Basically, in the next round, one of his students will go on to face Tien. Now, if you know what happens later on in the story, you might find this very reminiscent to a still-going strong Goku quitting against self to pass the baton off to his son Gohan. In essence, Goku followed in his master's footsteps by letting the new generation take the wheel, through essentially giving up. Goku holding the same mentality as his teacher becomes all the more evident during a conversation with Piccolo while passing on knowledge of the fusion dance to Goten and Trunks. where he implied he could have bested Majin Buu, but instead decided to let the younger generation handle it to teach them some responsibility, and since he knew he wouldn't always be around to bail them out if something went awry. So overall, Goku, with the same logic recreating similar events to a wise old master, supports him being one as well. The connections don't stop there either. Returning to the master-apprentice pair, Tien also revealed to Roshi how he desired to become like mercenary Tao, to which the old master subtly implied would be out of his reach because he lacks the wicked nature, something that if you know the later story, proves true. So Roshi excels at reading people to the point that he can analyze his targets better than they can themselves. Again, this event mimics what Goku told Gohan about the nature of Piccolo in relation to his progenitor, where he lacked the malevolence of his predecessor, and that he wouldn't end up the same person. And again, much like Tien with Roshi, that turned out true also. So in these two aspects intentionally depicting a character as wise, Goku followed suit, thus implying him as wise too. Next up, Old Supreme Kai, who at first glance comes across as a crazy senile old charlatan. He failed to deal with a low-level energy blast from Goku, and when he offered to unlock Gohan's hidden potential, he began with an odd dance that you'd expect from someone suffering from dementia. But despite his out-there first impression, he reveals himself as one of the series' wisest and most knowledgeable figures. His silly little ritual boosted Gohan's strength more than anyone anticipated. After Vegeta's absorption, his junior panicked, while he noticed Buu's unchanged appearance meant all was not lost. If you're a fan of Dragon Ball GT, you might enjoy how he indirectly predicted Omega Shenron and the rise of the Shadow Dragons when he discouraged the use of the Dragon Balls. What I'm getting at is, in Dragon Ball, some of the most unassuming characters turn out to be the most wisest and intelligent. Like, if you look closely, Roshi falls under this distinction as well, and I think this intentionally applies to Goku too, where his carefree personality laced with him living mostly untouched by civilization might project him as an idiot, when in fact, because of his vast expertise in other areas of intelligence, he actually proves himself as one of the series' smartest. So yeah, even though he may lack book smarts, that weakness gets counterbalanced by his wisdom, self-understanding, survival and people skills, mastery of his body and martial arts, and from his surprising amount of otherworldly knowledge. Think about it like this. He interacted, lived, and picked up new skills such as instant transmission and the fusion dance from aliens. So just referring to him as worldly is an understatement. With that said, on to the final subject. Now, as a character, despite his underrated intelligence, Goku is not above bad decisions. Like, he probably should have handed Gohan the Batara earrings instead of tossing it to him. But that's a bit off topic from what this subject is about. What I'm actually focusing on regards how some of these perceived foolish actions, which in context are actually understandable, have been misconstrued and flanderized Goku's image. Namely, his lust for battle sparking a tournament that nearly genocided several universes, which motivation-wise absolutely clashes with his established personality. Now, Goku obviously enjoys a good battle, but not to the point of endangering everyone else for his own narcissistic pleasure. Like when fighting Vegeta for the first time, he intentionally lured him to a deserted area away from people or wildlife so no one would get hurt. After turning Super Saiyan against Frieza, he shooed away Gohan and Piccolo to keep them safe. When a Super Saiyan 2 Team Gohan fought Cell, Goku accepted potential collateral damage at the cost of winning, but only because the Dragon Ball still existed and could undo any damage. Likewise, if his opponent came out the victor, far more casualties would have ensued, so it's a lesser of two evils. So all these decisions hint at him thinking of the potential ramifications before actually doing the deed. Besides that too, they suggest that Goku places the greatest importance on the well-being of others, which completely renders the idea behind the Tournament of Power outside of his character. So yeah, Goku's portrayal in the newest continuation of the story does not reflect his original depiction, and conveniently overlooks some of the precautions he took leading up to the fights he ever so desired. To say this too, in regards to the more knowledgeable fans who view Goku as a bit of an idiot, they base their logic off of factual evidence, but they often misinterpret its intended purpose to an incorrect conclusion. Like, they may know Goku is supposed to be a simplistic country boy, but they don't realize that that basically means he's uncontaminated by a corrupt vision. Overall, to sum it all up, Goku is not the dope that many make him out to be. He may lack book smarts, but he makes up for that in almost every other area of intelligence, especially in ones that'd be more beneficial to who he wants to be. And that's why Goku is the smartest person in Dragon Ball. Thanks for watching this video, hopefully it deepened your appreciation for this series and its cast. If you're interested in my other Dragon Ball related content, you might consider giving Explaining Goku's Cries and Broly the Legendary Super Saiyan a view. Again, thanks for watching.